I do a lot of metrics. I actually teach a course at CUNY on metrics that is 14 weeks, and we only have 45 minutes together, so I'm not going to really teach you anything. I'm just going to talk about how I use metrics to, or various ways of measuring and tracking to, to make our engagement projects successful. And so I went to this workshop yesterday with Sam, and I was trying to think about how there was a slide that said something like effectiveness and measuring effectiveness, measuring evidence, effectiveness, and insight. And those three terms, I've actually never really, I think about those terms, but I saw that slide and it like instantly hit me that like part of the way that I use metrics to measure engagement is this kind of different model of metrics, right? So like we have this traditional idea of, journalism. It's if it bleeds, it leads kind of an idea. And I started to like parallel metrics like that. If it bleeds, it leads style idea of metrics is like page views and unique views. And then I'm sitting in this workshop, and she shows this slide, and I'm like, this is exactly how I apply my thinking to measurement for engagement projects. It's a little bit different. I'm not looking for necessarily the biggest audience. What I'm really trying to find is that right audience, that one that is going to be most engaged with our investigation. So I'm going to kind of focus on that. But first, let's get through the kind of boring part. But the boring part is super important, and I have a slide that shows you how important it is. So when we think of metrics, we think of these things. We think of Omniture, Google Analytics. All of you in your newsrooms probably use some sort. If you don't work for The Guardian or The New York Times or Washington Post, you probably have you probably don't have custom dashboards that tell you everything you need to know all the time. So what you probably have is like Chartbeat and Google Analytics and Parsley and Omniture and Facebook Insights and Twitter Analytics, and you probably have to kind of pull all of that stuff yourself, and your editor or whomever is coming to your desk and saying, hey, Terry, what were the page views on that story? Oh, they were 100,000. Oh, that's really good. Well, is it? Or it's 20,000. Oh, that's really good. Well, really, is it? And then they'll say, well, what's the bounce rate? I'm like, do you even know what bounce rate is? Well, it's 89%. Okay, that's great. Well, it's not. Well, how can we get it down? Well, we could try this. It's these questions. Well, where's everybody coming from? Oh, they're coming from mobile Facebook. All right, let's do more mobile Facebook stories. What do you think that means, right? Like, and then where's the traffic coming from? Oh, it's parts social and search. All right, search. Let's get SEO in that headline. Let's make sure there's keywords in that headline. Okay, we're doing that. Why isn't search traffic going up? Well, it's at 24%. Why isn't it at 26%? It's and then this is my favorite. This is actually my favorite slide. Like this idea of video views, right? YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter all have different definitions of what a view is. So we recently did a story on, it's a ProPublica. We do stories that depress people, and so we just did this story about. Yeah, actually, that's what I'm pitching for. Get ready to be pissed. So we just did this story on. It was a terrible story. This man was, in 2012, this man was arrested for DUI. He was a 56-year-old man. He had, it was a DUI. Took him to LAPD. He was agitated. The LAPD ended up tasing him and choking him, and he ended up dying. And so California law is very hard to get these videos out of California for whatever, I'm not the expert, but for whatever reason, you don't get these videos. And the video that we got was from inside a precinct. It was leaked to our reporter, and we put it on Facebook, we put it on Twitter, and we put it on YouTube. And on YouTube, it got 270,000 views, right? YouTube is, so you have to watch it for around 30 seconds. That's huge for ProPublica. That's huge for us, right? Like, again, that's huge because 277,000 people saw this terrible video. On Facebook, it got almost 500,000 views. Now, 500,000 views on Facebook is a lot different than watching around 30 seconds. On Facebook, it's if you watch it for 3 seconds, that's considered a view. So I guess 500,000 people saw it for 3 seconds. And then on Twitter, a couple thousand people saw it on Twitter, but the definition for a view on Twitter is the sound has to be activated. It's just kind of all fucked up in some way. So I'm moving on to now social metrics, right? Like the reach. What is the reach of that post? If it hits 100,000 people, is that important? Did it get 83? This one got 83 comments and 336 likes, and like trying to make sense of all of this stuff. And we can, but it's just a lot of points to try and figure out what success really is. And then there's Twitter, right? Like this idea that we have a story and editors are like, did Ariane Huffington tweet it? And I'm like, yeah, she did. And it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't, like, those, if she tweets it, that's great, but it really doesn't, it really doesn't add to this idea that the story has been successful and it has reached a lot of people. Or like Mia Farrow, my favorite is when Mia Farrow tweets something. Somebody in our newsroom who will remain nameless comes up to me and says, hey, Mia Farrow tweeted it. And I'm like, well, I mean, that's great. I liked Rosemary's Baby. But I mean, I don't know. She was in Rosemary's Baby, right? Yes. Yeah, okay. I knew it was either her or some other short-haired white girl. I couldn't remember. So it's just like all of these kind of points are coming in, and there's so many of them, and it's really kind of, it feels like this. Like, sometimes that's how I feel. Like, they're all important, right? And you can't ignore them. They help you make decisions on your stories, but it can get exhausting. But here's why, and here's even for ProPublica why this is important. This is our board report. All of this is public. I am not like showing any information that you all can access publicly, but you better believe that that's a conversation. That our average unique ProPublica visitors are down per month for the first quarter of ProPublica by 3%. Now, we are a hits-driven organization. Not hits in terms of like page view hits, but like Motown hits, like the number one chart. Like we have these big tentpole investigations, and so when we don't have a big tentpole investigation every single month, our traffic, which is still important, goes down. And so, for dramatic purposes, I'm bored. I get really bored with these metrics, but they are absolutely important. And this is something that is like, put on my shoulders of like, why is it 3% down? I'm like, the moon, or maybe maybe we just need to win another Pulitzer Prize. I mean, how are we going to do that? So all of that said, that's kind of like, for me, that's the traditional way of important, right? Traditional journalism is important. Traditional ways of measuring things are important. But I'm really excited about or interested in how can I, outside of page views and outside of scroll depth, which we didn't really talk about, and outside of like all of the things that I just ran through so quickly, what are the points or what are the things that I can use to kind of increase the success or the success of the project or the distribution of the thing or the avenue in which people can participate. And this gets back to that slide from the thing yesterday, is like, this is exactly right. Like,
wait, did you have that in there or did you add it?
No, I put this in there myself. Wait, what's the question?
No, this slide was in there before that you went to the workshop last night.
No, I put this in after because I was inspired. I was inspired by the thing, right? So like this is like these three things, like I'm going to talk about this all the time now. Like I'm collecting evidence and I'm measuring the effectiveness of the actions that I take to gain insights on the things that I do. And I use these words things and stuff because it's kind of this amorphous thing, right? Like it's not like this, I can't put my finger on the thing that is important to that investigation at that point in time, or the trigger that is going to increase participation or increase engagement. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through two projects. One that is sort of came came after the investigation that was really distribution based, which is this one, and then one that is started with community engagement from the very beginning, which I know at least 1, 2, 3, 4 people, 5, 6 people have heard me talk about it already 100 times. So you guys can leave the room. But so I'll give you a brief. So what I'll do is I'll run through these kind of case studies or whatever, and show you how show you how I tried to measure. I did my best to measure who that right audience is and the success of reaching that right audience. And so this investigation was Firestone and the Warlord, and this was a piece that we did with Frontline. It was about Charles Taylor, who was a warlord in Liberia. He ended up assassinating the president and taking over the country. Firestone operated a rubber plant in Liberia that was basically the size of Chicago. It was enormous. When Charles Taylor took over, he kicked Firestone out. Firestone, the iconic American company that makes tires and rubber and all of these things. So he kicked them out, and then lots of other details, but Charles Taylor had child soldiers, like all the worst things that you could think of a warlord. Charles Taylor was part of that. So he kicks Firestone out. Firestone, after X amount of time, is like, holy shit, we're losing money. What if we just give him millions of dollars? Maybe he'll let us operate in Liberia. And he did. They gave him cash money, and he allowed them to operate their Firestone plant back in Liberia, and and so we did an investigation on this, and there was the reason we did it. It wasn't necessarily common knowledge of the exchange of money. So essentially, Firestone, in one way or another, helped Charles Taylor fund his campaign of terror or whatever. So it was 25,000 words. It was like 9 chapters long. T. Christian Miller wrote it, and he really loves to write a lot of words, and so I only read half of it. I couldn't even get through the whole thing. Great story, though. Great story. So we don't have. So we thought, okay, so this is important to Liberia's history. This is an important. One of the things that T said when he came back is or talking to us, is that this is still a conversation that happens in families this is still a real part of their history, right? I guess we can expect that, but this is something that is still something that they still talk about. And so what we wanted to do, outside of just writing 2,500,000 words or whatever it was, and creating a very standard distribution of social share cards or videos or whatever, we felt what is a way in which we can take all of this information and the expert in this story, and is there any possible way that we can actually put it in front of Liberians or West Africans? So we wanted to reach Liberians and expats, so we started researching how and what how could we do that? WhatsApp, at the time, and still is widely used. Billion people use it, or whatever the number is, and it's widely used in Africa. It's widely used in West Africa. We thought, and we had been playing with this idea of how can we incorporate that into some sort of engagement project, and it just kind of made sense, right? But that's just starting a number in WhatsApp, just putting it on a web page and putting it on ProPublica and tweeting it from ProPublica and putting it on ProPublica's Facebook page is not going to reach a Liberian audience. And so I started, one of the pillars of my work is audience research, right? I can't do my job without researching who that audience or that community is. And so I went and started talking to Liberian media companies, Liberian, various types of community or nonprofit groups in Liberia, expat groups here in America. There's a place in Staten Island called Little Liberia. I think it's called I can't remember the name of the city, but it's in Staten Island. It has one of the largest concentrations of Liberian people in America. And so I reached out to all of these groups and said, hey, we're doing this thing. We have this story. Here's the story. We want to get this number out. We want to get people involved. what we're going to do with it is we're going to try and break the story up into bite-sized bits. 25,000 words that's a lot of bits. And then also open it up to the reporter, or open the investigation up to whoever participates in this broadcast list. You can ask the reporter any question and he'll answer them, almost any question. On top of that, what is the feedback loop is so important in all of this stuff. Like, you can't do an engagement campaign without reporting back to them in some capacity. And so, like, our feedback loop was, if we got questions in and T answered them, we would respond to them specifically, or we would respond to the larger group. So it this was what it looked like on the page. We SoundClouded them. This was just for ProPublica, but the audio was directly messaged to those who asked it in WhatsApp itself, and it was incredible. Like, it was great. It was, I sound like Donald Trump all of a sudden. It was just incredible. It was just great. This is terrific. So this is what happened: is we got through this work, leveraging these other networks, because ProPublica does not have a large Liberian audience. We were able to get more than 175 people into the list. 18% of them were from Africa or expats, and that was based on country codes. I'll show you, I have a spreadsheet that we will talk about in a second, but it's based on country codes and then just determining it through conversation. So it's a little bit muddy, but it was the best that we had, right? Of that 18%, that 18%, by the way, was the highest engaged audience for this project. Was the Africans, and then 60% of that 18% were actually Liberians. So something like 20 of the 32 who I had determined they were from Africa in some capacity were Liberians. And we had created this really interesting, incredible dialogue between Liberians and our reporter. So the thing here is, what do I want to do? Like, I could simply have stopped and said, you know what, boss, we had 175 people participate in this broadcast list. And she would have said, she wouldn't have because she's a great person, but a boss could have said, that's only 175. Like, that's not a large number at all. And then I would say, boss, of that, and then I would have to go, back and say, boss, of that 175, 18% of those were the audience in which we actually wanted to hit. And she might say, oh, okay, that's a little bit better. And then I would go back and say, well, 60% of that 18 was the most highest engaged. It was like, the oyster, right? Like that the best part of the thing was that 60%, the highest engaged, the highest engaged with our reporter. We created this dialogue. We talked to people that we would have never talked to before. We reached an audience that, even if it was 20 people, we were able to distribute a story to them in different ways. So, like, how did I to be able to, like, effectively, smartly, and accurately and confidently say that I reached the right audience with that, I had to basically go through, like, can you see all that stuff? Right. So
nice colors.
Yeah, they all mean something. So this is WhatsApp is all manual, right? Like, I wanted to figure out, and I always think about this with every single engagement project, is how, like, that right audience is who are they, and how can I measure them? Is there any possible way I can figure out, track them? And so what I did is I went through and I tracked signups to see, and this is nothing revolutionary. You imagine when you launch a project, you're going to get the most, and it's going to go down. But what was interesting is this side, right? And what I did is I color coded. The blues are Liberians, the turquoise are Africans, not Liberians, and then I started tracking the conversation, like every time we had a conversation with them. And as you can see, like there's some like California, Georgia, or whatever, but like what this allowed me to do is to really understand that, like, I didn't merely just create a WhatsApp number, and I didn't merely just say, hey, talk to us. If this was all like, NPR people or like journalists or just people from Brooklyn, I would have called this a failure. Right? Yeah. Yeah. Huge problem. Right? Like this would have been a waste of my time. Like I'm not even kidding around. Like I did not want to distribute this story to my neighbors. I wanted to distribute the story. I wanted to put it in front of people who it actually like is part of their history. And it was super manual and like took a lot of time to like go back and like check country codes and do all of that stuff. But I'm glad I did it because 175 people on a broadcast list is a small number. But knowing that that most of these numbers or most of the people I engaged with were from Africa in some capacity or from Liberia, makes this for me one of the most successful things that one of the most exciting and successful things that I think that I've done at ProPublica. Even though it's small, hitting that tough community. I mean, it's not. It's not something you can walk out your door and just start distributing to Liberians a 25,000 word story and having them talk to a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter. But we were able to do that in, not tons, but a pretty decent amount. So I'm gonna move on to the next one.
Can I ask you a cynical question?
Sure.
Do you know if they're Liberians or, say, journalists in Liberia or travelers in Liberia?
Yeah, we don't know that, but based on conversation, they're not journalists. Based what I could gather from all of the conversations that we had, the journalists didn't engage with us. Journalists tweeted about the work we were doing. You can, if you go on Twitter and type WhatsApp at ProPublica, tons of journalists are like, this is cool and this is whatever. But these were, for the most part, from what I can gather, and been talking to journalists all my life, and I know how they talk, know what they smell like. These were not journalists. So, okay.
Did you get any trolls?
No. Well, one guy did try to sell me an iPhone. But it wasn't a troll. I mean, it was a good deal. I just didn't know I wasn't sure how the shipping was going to work from Liberia. So, but no, and we had another tiny little anecdote that is sort of hard to verify, but I can't remember the president's name. Is that coming up? Whoops. Shoot. Well, okay. I can't remember the president who was assassinated's name. However, we got a message from supposedly his grandson, who was living in London at the time, and of course we can't verify it, but he sent pictures, and I sent it on to T, and T had asked him some questions, and I said, what do you think? Do you think this is his grandson? And he says, well, we can never be sure, of course, but based on some of the things that I asked him, based on some of the knowledge of the experience, it seemed like it was him. Now, again, I can't verify it, but it's still pretty exciting that possibly we were talking to the grandson of the president who was assassinated. Any other questions before?
So what were the kinds of questions because you said you had conversations with people and you were doing this all individually, just like going through and responding to people?
Yeah.
What were the questions that you asked?
What were the questions they asked? We didn't ask them questions.
Oh, you just asked them to send it?
We said, here's this investigation, right? Here's all these points of investigation. What do you want to know? Do you have questions about I was going to pull up a Pete. I guess not. What do you want to know about your history? What are lingering questions that you have about the the Civil War itself? We didn't ask them questions. We wanted them to ask us questions. We wanted to essentially break up that investigation into pieces that they could consume, or instead of having them read the whole thing, just kind of have them pull out an idea, or have them ask us a question. So things like, was it necessary for T. Wesley Brown from Liberia? Was it necessary for Firestone to enter into the deal with Taylor? This guy from Nigeria said, quite frankly, Charles Taylor has been sentenced to 50 years in prison for war crimes, not in Liberia, mind you, for war crimes in a different country. He has never been prosecuted and has never served a day in jail for the war crimes that he or for the things that he did in Liberia. What is the main aim of this project? And so, I get what you're saying. Like maybe they don't.
How did you know his name and where he was from?
We would ask them. We talked to them. It wasn't that they just sent us a question. We were like, oh, here's the question. We engaged in conversation with them to like pull out. That's why I say like when I show you the let's see, this part based on country code or determined through conversation. Like I would ask them, where are they from? When I started manually chatting with them, because I had to manually do this. However, maybe Andrew could help us automate that. When I was manually talking with them, I would try and determine where they're from, what their names were, how old were they. Like I was reporting it, right? I was reporting it out as best as we could. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
So the prompt was right on the story itself, like the WhatsApp.
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll show you. Yeah. Oh, so it was on the story itself. It was sign up for this thing, and it looked like. Actually, I had the slide of it. We had a little like call out box, and then we had this thing, right? And so then what we try to do is share this with as many media organizations as possible. Could they put in ads in their paper and things like that? Asking them. I regularly ask people if I can leverage their networks in some way, and almost always merely just asking, just like a reporter, just asking somebody a question or asking somebody something, they can and almost always have helped us do this stuff. So
And what are you doing with the numbers now?
nothing. This was 2 years ago. It was clear, like we set the precedent that we were only going to be able to do. We were only going to do this for the 6 weeks of the investigation, or the 6 weeks of the campaign of the investigation. I mean, it's a good question. It's one thing that I think about regularly and think about more with our deeper community engagement projects, which is the one that I'm going to talk about next. But this one was really, this one had a lifespan. Even we would have struggled to keep it going anyway, right? It just seemed like there's this peak, and then there was this, and we only had so much. Like T writes the story, and then there's no like longer piece. It was like, here's 25,000 words, on to the next thing, right? And so without that sustained coverage of anything, this can't, like, there's not much more that we would be able to do with this, especially since the engagement team is essentially me right now. So, okay, I'll move on to the next thing. Questions? No? No? Okay.
I have a question, but maybe you'll answer it.
Okay.
Which is, how do you get someone like T. Christian Miller to do this stuff before the story comes out?
You don't. I don't. Yeah. I think. I mean, it's. There are reporters. There are. I mean, there are in our newsroom. There are reporters who, for example, on this project, there are reporters who totally are down with all of this, and they're just like, yeah, let's do badass journalism, and let's make sure the community has a voice and is folded into it. And then there's other reporters that just will just do the story and drop in their big Pulitzer Prize winning nomination, and then go on to the next thing. And I think that's fine. I think I think that the more, and I've noticed this in the 2 years that I've been at ProPublica, the more types of projects that we do like this, which we'll talk about, but the more times where we're successful, like our currency is a successful project. And if we continue to do really successful engagement projects that aren't this idea of like, well, we should do engagement. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love this idea, but we should do engagement because we want to bring voices and all of this stuff, and like, let's all hold hands and all of these things. That's all important, right? But but for a group of reporters and a group of editors, what I need to do is produce something that is interesting and so and successful and impactful. And so now, especially after this Agent Orange project, I have editors or reporters in our newsroom who I didn't peg as someone who wanted to do this type of stuff, saying, hey, I want to do an Agent Orange project too. And I was like, that's fucking great, man. Let's start talking about this. Let's do more of that. For not every reporter is going to instantly be down, and and then you're going to find reporters that are just champing at the bit to do some of this stuff. And I think like I find those people, and I work with them. You know, people are interested. Maybe the middle part is like people are interested, but they're really apprehensive, and so I kind of just regularly I build up that source. And then there's some that just aren't. They want to do interesting things, but but this idea of like engagement and incorporating like community voice on a scale in which we all want or we all talk about it's just not in their mind at this point in time. Maybe one day there's something there. I'm working with T on something. I'm chipping away at him. So maybe one day. So with that, yeah.
Well, no, I didn't want to interrupt your train.
No, that's all right. I would, yeah, that's fine. I don't know where the train of thought was going. So yeah, I was just gonna start talking again. Yeah.
No, you're just making me think. I mean, to the kind of holding hands and incorporating voices piece, right? So thinking about it from the perspective of public radio, it's the first time I've had the thought that ProPublica sort of is different, and there are probably other medias that are different in this way, in that your audience engagement piece can kind of be potentially a series of islands, and the continuity is maybe less important. So for instance, the idea of kind of that pop-up engagement where you generate these relationships and then drop them, that is a perfectly natural part of this overall life cycle versus public radio where those cell phone numbers, like I want to keep talking to those people for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, I think the Liberia, I mean, I can unpack that. So like, I think the Liberia,
I would not be asking the Liberians to pledge. But
right. Well, I mean, I worked at public radio, and you probably would be asking the Liberians to pledge. I mean, you ask everybody to pledge. Don't like.
Give them a free iPhone.
Yeah. Right. Come on. It's
one question. This is excellent fodder for our afternoon discussion.
Oh, okay.
This is exactly what we're planning.
Okay,
so I'll move on.
If we can have Terry to finish his presentation, then we can have lunch, and then we'll delve into that. Hold that thought, Andrew, because it's part of the discussion.
Okay, so I'll just jump into this one. This project is something that I've been spending the better part of the last year on. Is this question of how Agent Orange has impacted the children and grandchildren of Vietnam veterans, and right off the bat, my favorite part of this is that we didn't start this with the T. Christian Miller 25,000 word investigation. What we started with is a kind of 45, I can't remember how many questions, but this structured call out. We knew we wanted to investigate Agent Orange and how it has impacted children and grandchildren, which is a very difficult topic. It's a difficult topic to even investigate exposure to Vietnam veterans, Agent Orange exposure to Vietnam veterans, let alone their children and grandchildren. But we didn't really have a sense of exactly what or where or who the community was, and we're like, all right, we want to do this. Let's start with the community. Let's start with the veterans and their family members. And so we created this questionnaire. This it's not a survey because it's not scientific. It's a structured call out. I had 40 questions on it asking various things. We have 3 call outs that tailor to 3 sort of different parts of this topic: the veteran itself, the spouse or family member, and then a targeted one for children, because the adult children, the children have very different attitudes and different illnesses than the vet would even imagine, or the vet would talk about, or even the spouse would talk about. So who did we want to reach? We wanted to reach the veterans and the family members. With what? We had the structured call-out form, right? So again, it goes back to the thing is like, there's probably not a lot of 65 to 75-year-old men who were in Vietnam who follow ProPublica on Twitter, right? And so, like, we have to figure out, everything that Andrew and Jesse talk about is where are they and how do I get them? How do I get to them? Where are the things? Where are they congregating? How are they getting their news? And so, again, back to this audience research, from my desk at ProPublica in New York, like I don't have the privilege of going across country and, going to the VVA meetings. And so, like, what can I do from ProPublica? And so I kind of have 2 approaches. I always try to leverage the largest, not the largest, but leverage organizations that absolutely cater to this community, whatever community it is, Community X, but in this case it was veterans. and like, it's a lot of soft skills. Like I'm trying to essentially sell them on this idea. It doesn't take much because this is something that they care about. They care about these people and the welfare of these people. And so like I explained to them, like, we're investigating this. Can you help us get the word out? And almost always they do. And they have been instrumental in getting the word out to their constituents. The VFW Hall, the American Legion, various types of other larger veterans organizations. On the other side, what I've done is, after talking to a bunch of veterans, I realized that they all got their information from Facebook groups. So I joined, 75 plus Facebook groups that have to do with veterans. And, I say this all the time, but like my Facebook feed is very different now than it was before this project. For better or for worse, it is a different place. In my own Facebook feed, I feel like a stranger. So I joined all of these, and this has been a really big, important, and exciting part of this entire project. I don't go to their VFW meetings, but I am part of their VFW pages, and I'm talking to them, and I'm sharing our stories, but not in a transactional, I'm a journalist, read this because you should read this kind of a way. I'm like, hey, we talked to Jim, and Jim said this thing, and here's this story, and maybe you should fill out this form if you already have it, and then share this with 2 other people if you already have it. So it's a kind of a whole thing. And I was only been declined a few times from a couple groups, but I've almost been fully accepted as someone who is interested in this topic and is sharing information that these people care about. You might think, like, are you joining this Vietnam Veterans Facebook group? That they might be a little apprehensive as you being a journalist, and sometimes they are, but I'm a human being and I can talk to people, and I talk to them and they're like, oh, okay, Terry's here. Like, I'm Terry from ProPublica across the internet now. And so the other thing is we wanted to distribute the call out. We needed to write regular stories. This gets to this idea of, like, we had one Liberian story and we had an engagement campaign around one story, and then it dips because there's only so much we can do. For this, we've done 17 stories already. We're going to do some more, but we had a regular content plan. Like, are we creating stories on a monthly basis in some way that we're telling stories out of the database or out of the database of stories and adding our own stuff. Or adding our own reporting, of course, because we're ProPublica. In the feedback loop, right? Like asking for input and reporting back to contributors. This was huge, and I have a slide after this that will show you how huge it was. But reporting back to the contributors and the scale of the project, right? Like what is the community in which you exist? This is how many people have participated. Here's how many Army veterans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's really important to keep them abreast of, like, the size of the project and what the project was all about. So what has happened so far? We have collected 5,800 stories from veterans, their family members, and their children. We've written 17 stories that have at least one source from the questionnaire. I have sent out over, is it over or more than? I can never remember. More than. Math and words, I'm just, both of those things I'm not very good at. We have sent out more than 80,000 email messages that include bulk messages and individual messages to veterans and their family members, keeping them updated on our stories, asking them questions, asking them to participate in other things. That has been such an instrumental part. For example, like Bored and Brilliant, Info Magical, like both of those things have been I was at a I got the idea from Bored and Brilliant. Is Elaine here?
Yes.
Okay, Elaine. So you and Ariana did that talk at
In New Jersey.
yeah, right. Party favorite journalism and the email messages, and like that resonated with me. Part of this, there's some of that DNA in this in this thinking of just regularly emailing people to tell them what's up, right? Like, say what's up, or this is what's up, or what's up with you, or this is what's up. Like, just kind of regularly doing that. We also had one live event, which was awesome. A vet drove from Mississippi. He said, "Oh, you're Terry from ProPublica," which made my heart melt. And we had 3 VA officials show up. This is another interesting thing that we just started, and I'll get to the spreadsheet in a second, but this is another interesting thing that we did is so of the 5,800, we wanted to send a follow-up survey, another additional 40 questions that dug deeper into how the veterans' children's the children of the vets have been impacted by Agent Orange, right? Like listing their health issues, if they're still alive, if they're dead, all of these questions. It was like, a couple dozen questions. And we sent it out to the 3,323 veterans who had children during or after Vietnam that had participated in our survey. And I always think if I can get like 5% participation rate in something, I feel pretty good. And we have so far have had 24% of those 3,200 people fill out this secondary survey and fill it out correctly. And I've only sent 2 emails to them. I sent 1 email in June and 1 in July. And every time I send another email, I get another 300 or 400 people participating in this. The fact that I've not only had we've got 5,800 people to fill out this questionnaire. We've had an additional 800 or 24% of them fill out this larger questionnaire. So all of this just doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? I want to show you some more spreadsheets. And so like early on, this is actually probably my favorite spreadsheet. It doesn't make sense to you, but to me it's like it's like a symphony, if I can be so dramatic, right? So this spreadsheet, what this spreadsheet is it tracks the daily tracks the daily submission rates to our questionnaire, to the original questionnaire. And this is the beginning of the project. This is June 23rd, 2015, and this is I haven't updated this particular slide, but this is until like April something, right? April of this year. And so when we launched, this is the beginning, right? And so we launched it, and you could see like every one of these dots is some type of engagement that I did. I either sent out a message, like updating them on something, a story, or asking them a question, or asking them to participate in, like, one question was, what Facebook groups do you participate in? So if this is a message, maybe we published a story. I can't remember the color code, but one of all of these balloons include like sending out a message, publishing a story, having it posted to like a big Facebook page like American Legion or VFW, or a combination of all of those things. And so what I love about this is, like, one of the things is we always say, the community engages as much as you engage, right? The community participates as much as you're participating. And we can all say that, and we can all believe it, but this is evidence of that, because you see all of these little bubbles are something that I've done, that we did throughout the course of this investigation. And it I don't know, like, we got 400, or whatever this is, like 200 or whatever. Like, it's increasing the daily submission rates. And then all of a sudden, this is like October, then all of a sudden we get to like Pulitzer season, right? It's the end of the year, and like everyone's jamming on their award-winning work, right? And so we kind of pull away from this and focus on other things. And this is Veterans Day, November 11th. This is a year-end recap of our work, right? So all of this time here and all of this time here, we don't do anything. We don't produce a story. We don't send out a message. I don't post anything in a Facebook group, and nobody participates. Basically we're averaging like 25 stories a day, basically across this whole thing. And we don't, and then this comes and we're averaging like 1.2 stories a day contributed. So all of a sudden the year ends and we get refocused, because now it's the beginning of the year and we can focus on all of our projects. We start sending out more and more messages and writing more stories and getting it and like engaging. So like this is like a heartbeat of community engagement, right? Like if you're there and doing the thing, it's alive, and if you're not there and not doing the thing, your project's gonna die. And then here's another interesting. Oh, I had little red circles. There's some red circles. Okay, so then there's this other spreadsheet that I don't expect you to have any idea what this is, but essentially what I did is every single Facebook page that I posted something in, I posted a story or a video or one of the the call out, I would track that. I would track how that post did. I would have to do this manually too because we weren't able to build something that just did it automatically, unfortunately. It's probably there, but it's above my skill set. So why did I do this, right? Like, why would I? These are all the groups. These are the URL to the pages. This is the size of the reach of it. This is the post. This is just one screenshot. This is the post that I would make, like whatever the story is. And then this is like likes, shares, comments, total engagements, engagement rate. So like based on the size of the group and how many engagements there were, and then the share rate, which is something that's really interesting and important to me because I want them to not only comment and like it, but I also want them to share it. I want them to share the story or the investigation or the call out. So why do I do this? The reason I did this is because if I participate in 75 Facebook groups, I don't know exactly which ones are the most engaging or which ones actually consume the thing that I put in their Facebook page. And so the first time I did this, I went through and I just posted in every single one. And I calculated the engagement rate and I calculated the share rate to see who is mostly or highly engaged with the things that we post. Then the next thing what I did is then I reorganized it. I sorted the column to the highest engaged. And like you could be like, yeah, well, if you're going to have a high engagement rate if there's only 131 and they make 11 engagements. That's like almost 8.5% engagement rate. Yeah, but yes, it's awesome to have tens of thousands, but like I like this idea because this is like the right audience. Like these people are highly engaged in this thing, and so as I reorganize the engagement rate column, I have been able to make seemingly, I feel, I make a better decision on a more highly engaged group. So like I have a better, hopefully, ideally, a better success rate by posting in the groups that I think are engaging more regularly. And then let's see. Then this last thing, right? So this idea of like figuring out how people engage, what they do afterward, and how are they using this information. Now this is basically a reader survey, right? We created this participation questionnaire, but not necessarily like how often do you read, and this, what I want to figure out, and these are like each of these kind of participation points are based on various, specifically based on, there are points in here that are specifically based on this investigation. I want to figure out if people applied for benefits after they've participated in the Agent Orange investigation. We're doing the same thing for Dollars for Docs, this database that we have about prescription drugs. I want to see if people talk to their doctor about their prescription drugs after they used our database. And so we just started building this out and we're testing it right now. But this is probably one of the things that I'm most excited about in the next 6 months because ideally, hopefully, we'll be able, this idea of like evidence, what are I already forget the three things. Right, all of that, all the evidence, effectiveness, insight. I will be able to pull those three things out of this and ideally, hopefully, make better decisions about the information that we provide. Should we provide it in a different way? Should we be providing more or less of something? Or what people are doing once they participate in an investigation. Are people using our database to talk to doctors? Are people applying for VA benefits? Are people doing X, Y, and Z as other investigations become part of this? And then finally, here's just some takeaways that I think like they're very vague, but like a lot of this is very vague. I think the idea of success is going to be determined on what your project is. You have to, it's not a one size fits all. I actually think I say that. There's no one size fits all metric. But determine what your metrics are, what metrics are important to your project's work. Figure out how you might track those indicators and triggers. So like indicators and triggers for me are sending messages, writing stories. Like how am I gonna layer that over whatever the success metrics are for me, right? Like so I want to layer sending out messages and stories over the success metric of people participating in the survey. Use metrics to determine what's working and what isn't. I think that's the most important thing. It's kind of a no-duh, but like I don't want to. I am so bored by popularity. I just want to see if the things that I'm doing are important. And I realize I have the privilege of saying that for working at ProPublica because we're a little bit different. We're not a commercial news organization, but still like I want to find the right audience, not necessarily the biggest audience, although the big audience is pretty badass, but still. And a lot of these things that you saw, I had to develop them myself or figure out how I want to do it myself. So you all should learn Excel. I teach this class at CUNY, and I spend 3 class periods on Excel, and my students hate me, but it's super important. I think it's the underused tool for engagement work. So, and then that's my Twitter handle.
Great.
In order to have the necessary energy to learn Excel, we're going to eat.